Good morning, friends. How is everybody? Let's see. Can you hear me? Let's hope that works. So first of all, it's so good to see people in person. Thank you for being brave and coming out. This is my 30th year in education. And I know many of you. I have been doing the work with you. Hey, Kevin. Literally, I look out and I see people that I have been doing this work with for all 30 of these years. And we do this work because we fundamentally believe that every single kid in America can actually thrive if they have a great education. You're sitting in this room because you believe that, and yet and still we haven't systematically provided that for young people. You know that, I know that. What I say all the time is what we are looking for, the elusive quest, is for quality at scale. Nobody has figured it out. Not districts, not charter schools, not private schools, not anybody. We are all trying to find a way to ensure that every single young person in America gets a quality education, and we're still at it. We are still at it. Each moment in a child's life is an opportunity, and I think what we've realized over the last 2 years, or what we saw over the last 2 years, is that we have a collective opportunity to do something very different. We watched institutions of education all across this country fail students and families during the pandemic. We watched systems that were never built to be nimble or to be flexible not be able to be nimble and flexible and meet students and families where they were. We watched a nonprofit sector, an ecosystem of folks who have been supporting our young people, many of you in the room, stand up and rise up and actually meet the moment. And for me, this is a tremendous opportunity to rethink how we do some things. We have a collective opportunity with more money being passed through schools than perhaps ever before, with people who are willing to think differently and do things differently. And this moment is our moment. This is an opportunity for us to totally redefine how we do school. And part of redefining how we do school includes ensuring that our young people have an individualized approach where they get the help that each one of them needs, with a caring person. In fact, we have a lot more awareness about how our schools miss the mark in meeting student needs, and we have this funding. And so we have a research base that we had a decade ago that points us to the most promising practices. This brings us here today. This evidence shows that students learn more and engage more with relationship-based, individualized learning opportunities, led by well-trained and well-coached educators in small groups using high-quality materials and student data. Not news to any of us. But as we all know, these types of opportunities are incredibly, incredibly difficult to create in our public school system today. So we can do it. We're going to talk today about ways that we can do it. And I'm excited to invite AJ Gutierrez to the stage with me. AJ is here to share with us a little bit about the impact that HighImpact Tutoring can have on young people, and why we need to make this happen for all of our students. AJ first participated in tutoring when he was a middle school student, and I'm gonna ask you to come on up and let's talk to the people about what you experienced. So AJ, why don't you briefly introduce yourself to the audience, tell them a little bit about yourself and where you're from.
Hi everyone, I'm AJ Gutierrez. I'm the co-founder of Saga Education. I was born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts, as I like to say, a city of champions. It's a city that's near and dear to my heart. I grew up in the Villa Victoria, which is a Puerto Rican neighborhood in the South End in Boston. And it's a community with just a rich history of community activism, mobilizing to support one another for housing rights. My family has an amazing service ethic. That was just a big part of my DNA growing up. We were heavily involved in the development of City Year in the early days, way before they had their whole school, whole child initiative. But it was also a family just beset by so many challenges: trauma, mental health, addiction, alcoholism that deeply affected my family, and significant traumas that were very difficult that had a huge ripple effect on my family in that generation. You know, I had a grandmother who had 18 kids. It was a really big family. They had a lot of difficulty making ends meet, and so working through that has been challenging. And you know, I had, you know, my aunt. You know, she was the first victim of a serial killer in Boston, Massachusetts, and you know, she was 6 years old when she was viciously murdered. Same age as my daughter right now, 6 years old. And as you can imagine, it had a huge effect on my family. And you know, these challenges, these traumas manifest themselves, and sometimes in the worst ways in families. And my mother knew the ticket for me to be successful is education. And it was very challenging for her as a single mother of 3 kids. And you know, she's working multiple jobs. There's only so much she could do to make sure that school was a priority for me, and I struggled. You know, I felt very disconnected from school, not just because of the challenges my family's faced, but also the inequities that also exacerbated these challenges. You know, food insecurity was very common as I was growing up, and also inequities in quality of housing. You know, I was very grateful to have a home, to grow up in Section 8 housing, but you know, it was a space that had lead paint everywhere and had lead poisoning when I was a kid. So these are all these challenges that I was confronted, and I still have a vivid memory. And it was a 2nd grade struggling to read. That's how old I was. I still have that recollection, just not being able to engage in the content. And every year it just got harder and harder. The content was just very difficult for me to access. And you know, that wasn't even the worst part. I mean, from when I was in middle school and elementary school, my sisters, to say it differently, they were a little mischievous when we were in middle school. And I remember a crucial conversation with the principal at the school. My sisters attended the same school as I did. And she said to my mother in her face that, you know, your children will never amount to anything. They said that. I just remember seeing the look on my mother's face, the look on my sister's face. And needless to say, by the time I got to high school, I was very disconnected. My connection to school was in shambles. But it was a remarkable moment. Do you remember your first day of high school?
I do remember.
Yeah, do you all remember your first day of high school? Yeah. This person up front saying, yeah, I do. You know, my first day of high school is quite remarkable because that's when I met Alan Safran, who's co-founded Saga Education with me. And it was a completely different area of Boston. I didn't know any of the students. I showed up to the school very nervous, and the principal and Alan Safran was there. He extended his hand to shake mine, and he says, "Why are you here today?" And just a wave of panic just rushes through my body, and I was like, I think I'm registered to go to school here. And he says, "No, you're here to learn." And then he follows up and says, "You know, what does it take?" And in my mind, I'm like, what is this man talking about? I have no idea. And then I said, a pencil? He said, no, it takes courage, discipline, and perseverance. And every day, rain or shine, Alan, or the principal, was out there shaking students' hands, greeting them. And it was part of one of the many things that the school, Match Education, did to make sure the students felt a sense of belonging in the school. And it's wonderful to work alongside Alan, and who's an incredible coach and mentor of mine. And another important thing about the school is that it was a flagship site for high-impact tutoring. Alan Safran and Michael Goldstein coined that term. And I'm part of the first generation, one of the OGs of students who received high-impact tutoring. It was quite game-changing for me.
Tell us a little bit about your tutoring experience.
Well, my tutors, I thought, were the coolest people in the world, first of all, and they were near peers, and not only helped develop my skills and understanding of the concepts being covered in class, but there were just these intangible things that are really important. You know, one of the tutors I had a chance to work with, Match Education is right next to Boston University, so this was a student at Boston University. So he took me and a couple of my friends to the dining hall at Boston University, and one of his friends was in charge of swiping people in. He's like, yeah, these really great kids, can you let them? He's like, all right. So I go into this dining hall, and I just see, the first thing I remember is this wall of cereals, and I was just like, couldn't believe it. I was like, this is amazing. I was like, I have to go to college now. You can thank General Mills for my passion for wanting to go to college. And so there's remarkable moments like that. And so I actually shared this story with this tutor a few years ago. He's like, that's why I took you there, man, so you can get inspired.
The exposure thing is huge.
That's right.
Academically, talk to me about how tutors supported your academic journey.
Well, I think the biggest thing for me academically was the alignment with what's going on in school. And, I had the opportunity to participate in tutoring, ad hoc tutoring in different programs, but working alongside a tutor who was walking in lockstep with what the school is doing and followed my goals for what was going on in class was really helpful, and it was very targeted toward what I was actually trying to accomplish, which was very helpful for me. And then academically, it's just looking someone who can just meet me where I am and help bring me where I want to be. Made a significant difference as well, because my teachers, although they really cared for me, they just don't have time. Even the best teachers, we had remarkable, talented teachers at Match, just didn't have time to consistently provide that targeted support I needed.
You said at the beginning accessing the content was really difficult because you were a struggling reader. What happened in high school that made it feel differently?
Someone feeling connected with someone who's just going to fire you up to swim laps. I mean, that's, to get better, you got to put in the work, and, to have a coach, by your side to help inspire you to put in those laps, put in that work, made a big difference. I even stayed after school to practice. My tutor would come, bring a bowl of soup, we'll sit down and put in the work together. And so that was some of the things that helped me excel academically.
Favorite tutor? Who was he or she?
You're going to create some fighting words.
That's okay.
That's going to be dangerous. All my tutors were phenomenal, near and dear to my heart. I'm still connected to each and every one of them, including Jared Talifer, Stacia Cutter, Mark Gutman. Jared Talifer, who went on to start Great Oaks Legacy Charter School in Newark, is doing incredible things. So proud of him. I think that not only was he and the tutors central to helping me feel excited about school, but there were many challenging things that happened in school along the way, traumatic things that they were so helpful in helping me overcome. And one moment in particular that comes to mind was when I was in my junior year of high school. I was spending time with a close family friend who had someone living with them who were not doing really great things, to put it nicely, and there was a warrant out for that person's arrest. And so the police officers came and raided the apartment, and it was quite traumatic for me, having all these police officers come in, yelling at me, having firearms pointed at my chest, asking me for an ID. And at the time, I didn't have an ID. I was 17, 16 years old. And then as quickly as they came in, created this just chaos. They were out, and I was just left in the space alone. And trying to process that as a high school student was very challenging. And I remember the next day, sharing this with my tutor, and how that was so important for my healing along the way. My tutor couldn't do anything to address the challenges. My tutor, but just having a caring adult just listening meant the world to me at that time, and was central for me to start that healing process. And my tutor kind of put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Well, I know you, AJ. That's not who you are. I know you're a hardworking, caring student, and I believe in you. And let's get to work." And just hearing that made the world to me. It made a huge difference.
So give us the quick version of the rest of your journey. Graduated from high school, and then what happened?
Well, I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to serve, to be a student at Match Education. Eventually get a full scholarship through the Posse Foundation to Union College in upstate New York. And I was just so fired up about addressing systemic issues and challenges in education. We've spent billions and billions of dollars in K-12 education, and these inequities have been consistent over decades in looking for something that actually moves the needle. And so I had the chance to serve as city here in AmeriCorps in the community where I grew up, which kind of strengthened my passion and interest in education. And then Alan came to me and said they did some interesting work in the Houston Independent School District, replicating high-impact tutoring as part of a quasi-research study with Roland Fryer. And he said, well, would you be interested in working with me at MAPS to incubate this approach to see if we could replicate this to traditional district schools throughout the United States? I said, hell yeah, that sounds like an amazing opportunity, and it's been an incredible ride since then.
So you dedicated your life to this work at this point?
Absolutely, absolutely. Education transformed my life, and it's such a pleasure to bring something that had such an impact on my life to millions of students throughout the United States. So as I think about Saga education, it's a body of work that's deeply important to me because of the effect it had on my life and the lives of my peers as well.
So all of these people are here today because they believe what you believe in the potential for high-impact tutoring. What advice do you have for this crowd today as we undertake the real change that we're trying to make, which is not just instituting high-impact tutoring in every school? It is really about changing the way we think about schooling to make this a core and bedrock piece of the way we do our work with students.
Yeah, I think what we've done at Saga is highlighted an area worthy of additional exploration. I'm really grateful to the University of Chicago Education Lab for the research they've done, and I think what's exciting is that we're trying to change the way we think about human capital in education, right? We're trying to carve out space for a new type of role in school day tutoring to supplement the great work of our classroom teachers. I mean, that's at heart what we're trying to do. And at Saga, we've demonstrated some interesting pathways to do that we are very excited about. And as we think about moving forward, high-impact tutoring is not only powerful in terms of the way we think about hedging against the effects of COVID-19, but how we think about educational delivery in the long term.
Any advice? What are you telling these folks that they need to do?
So the advice is, there are specific hallmarks that lead to success. And at Saga, there's hundreds of things we take into consideration to implement an effective program, but there's specific things that are important that I think are necessary for effective implementation and at the same time are flexible enough for districts to modify the model to meet their needs of the local context. Making sure it's part of the school day. It's so much power when tutoring is just embedded into the regular ecosystem for how kids are learning. Making sure those pairings are consistent. Right? Kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Those relationships are essential for unlocking that student potential. And making sure that students are working with a tutor every day or every other day. That consistency is key. And at Saga, the sweet spot where we start to see significant academic gains when you have 60 hours to 140 hours worth of instruction, or where you start to see significant growth for students as well.
Thank you, AJ. You have walked the walk. In addition to talking the talk, we're going to continue to talk over the course of this day. But this is proof in the pudding that high-impact tutoring changes lives, and we together are going to work to ensure that that happens for every young person in America. Thank you.
No, thank you.